Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and I have for you something a bit different today. Thrift Store Horror is my collaborator on the channel. I use them for resources on what to read next and how to get books that I'm missing. And in some cases, I'm tracking down the wrong book entirely because it's the UK release and I already have the United States release. Anyway, recommendation was 13 Tales of Horror by 13 Masters of Horror. This is a compilation novel. It's all short stories. I have not read this before, but it came highly recommended by Thrift Store Horror. So we have stories by R.L. Stine, Caroline B. Cooney, Christopher Pike, D.E. Atkins, A. Bates, J. Bennett, Carol Ellis, Diane Ho, Lael Littke, Sinclair Smith, J.B. Stamper, Ellen Emerson White, and Patricia Windsor. Half of these authors have worked with Scholastic and Point Horror in the past. This should be pretty fun. And we all know about R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike, right? Believe it or not, I haven't really read any Diane Ho, or Sinclair Smith, or Caroline B. Cooney, but I do have a Cooney novel in the works, so stay tuned for that. I will be reading one story from this compilation and then publishing that as its own episode. I'm going to use this book like glue. If there's any holes or gaps or weirdness going on in my schedule, I'll be using one of these stories to fill that void. Just something fun to do. So let's begin. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can write me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the join button to show your support. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me narrate them a story. Thank you very much for listening, and let's begin. Welcome to a Nightfall Audiobooks production of Collect Call Part 1 by Christopher Pike. The party was a bummer from the start. It was an old story. Janice Adams liked this guy and Caroline Spencer liked him, and there was only one of him to go around, so there were bound to be problems. His name was Bobby Walker, and he looked so fine. He had only lived in Chester Rock a few months, the town where Janice and Caroline had both grown up. He had appeared the previous May, a month before summer vacation started, just long enough to get all the girls in Chester Rock High sweating, and then had vanished until the second week in September, when classes reconvened. His hair was jet black, his face both stern and quietly amused. He could smile and look serious, but he did not need a smile to make Janice believe he thought their high school was a joke. He had style. He didn't walk with a swagger, but he had a walk Janice was always following around. He wore faded jeans to school, a black leather jacket, the same thing every day. Bobby's jeans were tight, and Janice liked that about him too. A guy named Randy Claude was putting on the party. He was student president, and he was always having people over to his house. Janice liked Randy. He was a social climber, but he made no secret about it. He was always telling people how he was going to vote Republican as soon as he was old enough to buy fine wine and play the stock market. Randy's dad had so much money, he spoke of his real estate and his son as a long-term investment in the same breath. Janice and Randy were old friends. Janice did not like Caroline Spencer. Besides their rivalry over Bobby Walker, Caroline was a cheerleader. In fact, she was head cheerleader, and she was about as real as a sitcom in syndication. Caroline actually walked around school on gym days talking to kids with her megaphone. She had a big round mouth. Everything she said drove Janice crazy, but Caroline was a blonde babe too, and that bugged Janice even more, especially at the party and on the way home from the party. Yeah, Janice ended up having to give Caroline a ride home. It was just a bad night all round. But that didn't happen until near the beginning of the end. At the start of the party, and pretty much through all of it, Janice sat in a corner drinking beer, talking to Randy Claude, and watching Bobby Walker slide from one group to the other without ever joining in on any reindeer games. Bobby carried a beer in his right hand and a cigarette on his lower lip, but he wasn't drinking much, and the same dark smoke seemed to hug him no matter which way he turned. Janice burped and raised her beer to her lips. It was her fourth, but she always counted a six-pack backwards. She felt clear-headed, if not a little depressed. "I wonder if he ever washes it," Janice said to Randy. "Tell me what you're talking about, and I'll agree with you," Randy said. He had gone through plenty of beer himself, but he slushed it around inside his mouth before he swallowed. He read somewhere that alcohol would not eat his liver without the carbonation to make it hungry. At least that was what he said, but he was always saying something. I'm talking about Bobby Walker's leather jacket, Janice said. He never takes it off. It must be filthy. The same with his pants. He takes his pants off, Randy said. He's in my PE class. Really? You never told me that. You never told me you were in love with him. Janice coughed. She had been smoking a cigarette earlier, but only because she thought Bobby would want to come over for a light. Her lungs were still virgin, along with the rest of her. I'm not in love with him, she said. Don't say that. Then why are you undressing him with your eyes? Randy asked, fixing his fat glasses on his small nose. He was blind as a bat without his glasses, but could smell a good meal a mile away. He was 17 and already 30 pounds overweight. I've been watching you all night, and you've been watching him. Christ, if I had feelings for you, they would be hurt. Janice smiled. It's lucky for both of us that we're cold and heartless. She paused. What does he look like in his shorts? Randy laughed. That's not what you're asking. Janice hit him. I don't care what he looks like in the shower. People looked over. She quickly settled herself down. Bobby was at the far end of the living room. He was touching the leaf on a plant. He had not looked over. How did this conversation get started? She grumbled. You were talking about washing Bobby's jacket, Randy said. Why don't you go offer to do it now? He's alone. He might even be lonely. You never know. It's possible. I can't just walk up to him, Janice said. Why not? I've seen you talk to him at school. He knows you. He knows me like he knows our school hallways. I'm just someone he passes by and smiles at. You're lucky, Randy said. I don't think he smiles much. He punched a guy in PE the other day. Broke the guy's nose. Janice grimaced. What did the guy do to get him mad? Called him a name? Well, he probably doesn't like being called things. Randy shrugged and finished his beer. Yeah, but I think the guy just called him Bobby. Guess Bobby didn't like the way he pronounced it. Are you saying he's a jerk? Randy waved his hand. Nah, if you like him, he's not a jerk. You are diplomatic. Why did you invite him to your party if you don't like him? I didn't, Randy said. He invited himself. Janice continued to watch Bobby. He was still admiring the plant. Janice felt a pang of nervousness. Randy was right. If she was going to talk to him, she should do so now. Bobby wouldn't be alone long. He was, after all, the main reason she had come to the party. Why? She asked. He seems such a loner. I don't know, Randy said. Maybe he came here to meet somebody. It's possible. Anything is possible. Would you quit saying that? Here, hold this. Janice gave him her beer and stood. I'll be back in a few minutes. Randy patted her on the bottom as she stepped away. I'm proud of you, Jan. Watch your nose. Thank you, she said. Bobby did not look up as she approached. She took that as a bad sign. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she was thankful for the background music. For some reason, it was really a ridiculous thought. She believed he would have been able to hear the sound of her heart. Hi, she said. Bobby? He finally looked up. His eyes were brown. That was supposed to be a warm color, but brown was also the color of the hard ground. And looking at him in that moment, Janice thought for an instant that his eyes were as empty as the barren earth. But then he blinked and flashed her a smile, and she relaxed a bit. Hi, he said. What's your name? She giggled. Jan, you remember? He removed his cigarette from his mouth and put it out in the soil surrounding the plant. She supposed he wasn't a plant lover after all. Oh, yeah, he said. What are you doing here? She shrugged. Hanging out? How about you? Having fun? No. No? That's too bad. That's awful. He looked about, the line of his strong jaw an unreadable shadow in the dim light. He straightened his black leather jacket over his tapered shoulder with hardly a movement. You know what I hate about this scene? He asked seriously. What? He leaned closer, and she could feel his breath on the side of her cheek. It was cold. The beer he had been drinking must have been cold. The people, he said simply. You hate the people? All of them? That amused him. His grin grew a size bigger. All of them except you, Fran. Jan. Janice, he corrected her. She giggled again nervously. Right. Hey, this is really neat talking to you. What did you do this summer? I didn't see you around. I was here. I was around. But you only come out at night, right? He looked her straight in the eye. You got it, sister. Then they were rudely interrupted. One of the cheerleaders on the squad. It was Susie McQueen, and she looked like a Susie Q with all the white cream pouring out and making a mess of everything. Flipped off the music and jumped to the center of the room and started a loud announcement. Hey everybody, Miss Q called. I hope we're all having a great time. Isn't this party the best? Isn't Randy the greatest for having us all here? Susie began to clap her hands vigorously. Let's hear it for Randy. Jesus, Janice whispered, clapping in slow motion. She noticed Randy hadn't even bothered to stand up. "I've got an exciting secret," Susie Q went on. "Tonight is somebody's birthday. Whose is it?" she squealed. "It's a secret?" "No, just kidding. This is also great. It's our own star cheerleader's birthday. Caroline Spencer's." "Yeah! Where is Caroline? There she is. Come out here, Caroline. Happy birthday to you. Come on, everyone." Caroline bounced into the center of the room with such blushing shyness that her cheeks looked like they needed a blood transfusion to maintain it. They sang her happy birthday. Janice didn't sing. She silently watched Bobby out of the corner of her eye. He just stood there staring at Caroline with a faint grin on his lips. He stood so still, Janice would have thought he had gone to sleep on his feet if his eyes had not been open. "It isn't even my birthday," Caroline gushed when the group was done praying for her happiness. "It's tomorrow." "That doesn't matter," Susie Q said, giving Caroline an affectionate cheerleader hug. "The party's tonight." The two of them laughed together like that was the funniest thing in the world. The rest of the party turned back to their beer and conversation. "Well, that was special," Janice said to Bobby. "Yeah," Bobby agreed. Then he did the worst of all possible things. He called Caroline over. "Hey, Carol, I've got a present for you." This is not happening, Janice thought. He likes her. No one could like her. But that was not true. Any guy who wanted looks would have wanted Caroline. Her long blonde hair had the sun shining through it in a dark room. Her face was as round and sweet as apple pie and ice cream. Her clear skin knew how to hug the right curves. Her green eyes may have been silly, but they could sure dance. I looked like a bookmark next to her, Janice thought, as Caroline heeded Bobby's call and turned toward them. That was not true either. Janice was a pretty girl. Her dark hair may have been short and straight and cut in simple bangs, but the face it framed was full of wit and intelligence. Her features were finer than Caroline's, her skin paler. She had a lovely smile, but the traumas of high school had forced her to add a cynical line to it. Her figure would have been fuller had her stomach been less nervous and her appetite less petite. The clothes she bought in September were usually too loose by October. The date of the party was November 2nd, and as Caroline began to walk toward them, Janice felt unusually haggard. At least Caroline didn't bring Susie with her. Of course, Janice had seen Caroline with Bobby talking many times at school, but it had always been for just a few minutes, and Janice had assumed Caroline fit in the same class as herself in Bobby's eyes, someone to smile at in the hallways and maybe get to know better later. "You really got me something?" Caroline gushed. Life was just one big gush for her. One of these days, Janice thought, Caroline would gush out her guts. But it was just a thought, not at all mean. "Sure did, babe," Bobby said. He reached into the pocket of his black leather jacket. Janice noticed how clean the leather looked, how its fresh smell filled the air. Bobby pulled out a tape cassette and handed it to Caroline. "I would have wrapped it," he said, "but you just would have had to open it." Caroline thought that was a riot. Janice smiled like she cared and she didn't care, trying to be cool. Bobby nodded his head and stared at Caroline without blinking. Caroline studied the cassette. "This is so nice of you," Caroline said. "Who's this by?" "The Black Walker," Bobby said. "Do you know him?" "Yeah," Caroline said, but she frowned, meaning she didn't know the artist at all. "He's one of my favorites." "He's the best," Bobby said, for once showing enthusiasm. He moved a step closer to Caroline, subtly leaving Janice out of the conversation. "Listen to him, and you'll see God." Caroline giggled. "Does the Black Walker have a video out? I thought I saw him on MTV the other day." Bobby snorted, not pleased. "The Black Walker doesn't prostitute himself. You can feel him, but you can't see him. He's never been on TV. Caroline rolled with the remark. "That's how it is with real talent," she said gamely. "You never know it's there." Bobby smiled again, but this time it was definitely a cold smile. He reached out a hand and touched Caroline's shoulder and squeezed it. He may have squeezed hard. Caroline grimaced slightly. "You have fun on your birthday," he said. Then he hurried to Janice and winked. "It's soon," he told her. "Pardon?" Janice said. Bobby didn't answer. He just walked away. The two girls watched him go. "Happy birthday," Janice said softly. "It isn't my birthday yet," Caroline said. She slipped the tape into her pants pocket. Janice checked her watch. 11:15. "It's soon," she said, still thinking how cute Bobby Walker was. Cute and mysterious, the way guys are supposed to be. The girls didn't talk anymore, not till later, after midnight, when Janice was getting ready to go home. By then she was 2 beers drunker and feeling like a cockroach that had just been sprayed with Raid. It was Randy Claude who cornered Janice as she headed for the front door. "Can you give Caroline a ride home?" he asked. No, Janice said. She needs a ride. Susie left without her. I don't know why. You live near Caroline. Just give her a ride. You don't have to fight with her. I don't have to do anything. Janice looked around. The party had thinned, but there were still at least a dozen viable candidates for the job. She didn't see Caroline. Why do I have to do it? She asked me if I could ask you, Randy said. She asked? Caroline hates me. Don't give me that crap. She doesn't hate you, and you don't hate her. You're just mad Bobby gave her a present. That was partly true. She had been hurting since Bobby had ignored her to call Caroline over. She had to blame somebody for the humiliation, yet Caroline was a pain in the ass under the best of circumstances. Where is Bobby? Janice asked. Tell him to give her a ride home. He's already left, Randy said. Come on, she doesn't have a ride. You'll be going right by her house. She lives 2 miles off Taylor. That's not near my house. Janice shook her head, and the surroundings shook with it. She knew already that she would have a thumper of a headache tomorrow, and that, too, would be Caroline's fault. I think I'm drunk, Janice said. Then that's more the reason to have Caroline with you, Randy said. She can drive to your house. Have the windows down. Fresh air will clear your head. Where is she? Janice asked. In the bathroom. I think she's throwing up. Janice snorted. Right, I should have her drive. She turned toward the door. Tell her if she wants a ride, she better be outside in 10 seconds or I'll be gone. Caroline took more than 10 seconds to reach Janice's twice-rebuilt Mustang, but Janice was still parked, waiting for her car to warm up. The northern California night was brisk. Janice fumbled for her coat as Caroline climbed in. Thanks for waiting for me, Caroline said. She smelled of mouthwash and beer, but not vomit. No problem. Janice put the car in gear and rolled forward. Chester Rock was a small town that went to bed early. There would be a few people on the road. Janice reached over and put on her seatbelt. She always put it on once she was already going. Why did Ms. Q leave without you? Who's that? Susie, Janice said. Caroline shrugged, staring forward, her head bowed slightly as if she were wearing a fat hat. She didn't like me flirting with Bobby Walker? She likes Bobby? Janice asked. I guess. I see, Janice said. Why do you call her Ms. Q? Caroline asked. Everyone does, Janice belched. The name suits her. Caroline was offended. I don't think that's nice. She's a friend of mine, you know. I can't help who you choose for friends. You're in a pleasant mood. I'm giving you a ride home, ain't I? I'm grateful. Yeah, well, it's no problem. You know where I live, don't you? Caroline asked. Out on Taylor. Yeah, Caroline looked around the dark dashboard. Does this car have music? Janice nodded. But the antenna's busted. The radio's lousy. I listen to tapes. Janice paused. Why don't you put on the tape Bobby gave you? Caroline shifted in her seat, fishing it out of her pocket. He caught me off guard when he gave it to me. I didn't know he cared that much about me. It probably cost him a week's salary to buy it. Caroline fumbled as she tried to slip the cassette into the player. I really don't think so, Jan. Here it goes. I've never heard of this guy before. Have you? Can't say I have. The music came on. Dark, sensual synthesizers. A drum machine in tune with a disembodied spirit. Then a haunting voice as cold as gray snow and as deep as a forgotten well. Powerful stuff. I come from the past. I eat the night. I knew you when you were young. I tell you my story, but I sleep with a gun. This is my night. This is your night. I'm a Black Walker, babe. Touch me softly and you get a fright. The stars are holes in the sky. The moon is a thorn in the dark. It grips white light. Give me the knife. Let's cut out our eyes. Yeah, this is our night. This is what's right. I'm a Black Walker, babe. Brush my lips and I bleed you white. Well, Caroline whispered when the song was done. She pushed the stop button. That's a great song. It is? Janice frowned. The guy sounds kind of familiar, but I could swear I've never heard that song before. I'd remember it. Bobby said that Black Walker wasn't on MTV? That's true. That's what Bobby said, Janice muttered, suddenly angry at the casual way Caroline was using his name, like they were the oldest and best of friends. It also bugged Janice that she was having to go so far out of her way to take Caroline home, especially since the heat in her car wasn't working and her ass was freezing off. A few minutes of silence passed between them, during which time Janice managed to drive out of Chester Rock proper. It was such a hole-in-the-wall town. The hilly countryside surrounding the city was covered with gnarled olive trees and parched grass. The road to Caroline's house went up and down, and Janice tried her best to flow with it, but her brain was riding its own seesaw. Topping off her growing resentment of Caroline was a distinct feeling of nausea. The last couple of beers sloshed around in her stomach like they thought they were in a public washer. She didn't want to throw up in her car. She thought biting conversation might distract her. "So what's it feel like to be head cheerleader?" Janice asked. "I love it. You get a real rush of energy when you're out in front of all those people." "What kind of energy?" Caroline sat up and put a hand to her head. She didn't look so clear-minded herself. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Is it a sexual energy? A satanic energy? A nuclear energy? I don't know what you're talking about." "It doesn't matter. I was just wondering what went through your head when you had your megaphone up to your mouth." "I don't know if that's any of your business." Janice giggled. "I see it hit a nerve. Don't mess with the girl's megaphone. How kinky you raw girls really are. Why did you want me to give you a ride home anyway? Why didn't you get one of the gorillas on a football team to take you back?" Caroline looked over at her in the dark. "You don't like me very much, do you, Jan?" "I don't know what would give you that idea." "I wanted to talk to you about Bobby Walker," Caroline said. "Really? How exciting. Talk to me." "I don't want you fooling around with him." Janice was astounded. For a moment she couldn't even respond, but when she found her voice again, it came out far from pleasant. "You don't want me to do what to Bobby? Is that an order? Does God always give such authority to head cheerleaders? Jesus Christ, you are a piece of rock. Why should I do anything you want?" "I thought I could ask you as a friend." "But I'm not your friend. You're right, I don't even like you." Caroline got mad. Janice supposed it was about time. "You're just jealous, that's your problem? You don't like me because I'm pretty and popular?" Janice laughed. "Don't flatter yourself. I don't like you because you're you. If you were a flat-nosed geek that took study hall in the janitor's closet, I still wouldn't like you. But let's forget about that. Tell me about your plans for Bobby Walker." Janice crossed her arms over her chest. "No." "Have you gone out with him?" "No, but he's going to ask me out." "How do you know?" Janice asked. "I can tell. All the guys want to go out with me." "Did it ever occur to you that this may be the very reason he doesn't want to go out with you? Because you're such a slut?" Caroline lost it right then. Her reaction caught Janice completely by surprise. Janice didn't expect an all-American apple pie cheerleader, even a slutty one like Caroline, to reach over and belt her in the face. The blow was a good one. For a moment, the seesaw in Janice's alcohol-fogged brain stopped going up and down and spun in wild circles. By the time it settled back down, 2 seconds later, Janice had the car heading straight off the road. They had picked a bad spot to fight. Here the road climbed and turned sharply to the right. Janice's right foot searched wildly for the brake and hit the accelerator again, hard. They raced across the opposing lane and hit the graveled shoulder. They were out in the country for all practical purposes. There were no rails. There was not even an asphalt curb. They went off the shoulder and into the black air. It was a long way down. Time did not slow for Janice, but the reaction of her senses greatly speeded up. She saw and felt everything. Indeed, in her eyes, it was almost as if the dark surroundings had suddenly been lit up by a brilliant moon. As the car slowly turned more vertical than horizontal, she could distinguish the tiniest of stones below them, as well as the big ones. It was the big, sharp ones that concerned her the most. They glinted in her headlights like an unnatural maw. She knew they were going to play hell with the front end of her car. The ground rushed toward them as fast as they rushed toward it, and where they met was filled with confusion. But before that awful moment, the tape in the player somehow slipped back into place and sang to them. It sang as they fell. "This is my night. This is your night. I'm a Black Walker, babe." They hit at a 45-degree angle to the ground, but the impact did not entirely stop them. The side they'd gone over was almost as steep. They continued on down into the abyss on a wave of screams and shrieks. Janice realized almost indifferently that the two of them were crying their heads off. Maybe it was the alcohol, the shock, the combination of the two, but the accident could have been happening to someone else. Janice felt as if she observed from a distance. Loud sounds thundered up from below them. It was deafening, until it stopped. Then the silence rang, the stillness. The tape went off. Janice felt pressure, the hand of the world on top of her. She realized her eyes were closed, and opened them. A sharp stab went right through the side of her head, and everything flared a bright red. Then normal vision returned, and she saw the horror of the situation. The car had come to a stop at only a slight downward incline. In that respect, they were lucky. They had made it all the way to the bottom of the cliff. Unfortunately, they were not in one piece. The shatterproof windshield had cracked all over them. Janice felt glass in her hair cutting her face. The engine and everything else that made it work had been pushed practically into their laps. Most of Janice's pain radiated from her knees. They were on fire, and she could feel the liquid warmth of her blood as it seeped down toward her ankles. The space beneath the steering wheel was no more. A strong smell of gasoline choked the air. Janice looked over at Caroline. The cheerleader was covered in blood. She had forgotten to put on her seatbelt, and Janice had failed to remind her. The top of Caroline's skull had hit the windshield. Her once sunny blonde hair was now a sad late sunset. Janice reached over and touched her, and Caroline's head rolled lazily to the right side, bumping against the mangled metal of what was left of the passenger door. Her green eyes lay open, and they stared at nothing. But Janice wondered if she saw any of those things for real. It was so dark in the ruined car. Maybe she only imagined the details. Maybe it didn't matter. She could see enough to know that Caroline was dead. "Oh, God," Janice whispered. What was she supposed to do now? If a car drove by, the driver wouldn't even know someone had gone off the road. She and Caroline could sit in the wreck until dawn before help came. She had to get out of the car somehow. She had to go for help. For who? For myself. No one can help Caroline now. Janice used her hands to gently pull up on her knees. The blood flowing from her cuts on her shins acted as a lubricant, and she was able to squeeze her legs free from the pressure of the collapsed steering column without hurting herself any worse. At first, her lower legs were partially numb, and she worried she had damaged the nerves and would be unable to walk. But as she swung them over to the side of the exploded door in her left, despite the damage to it, the door handle was still intact and the door opened easily, and massaged her calves, the feeling returned. The pain was still there, but it was decreasing swiftly. She glanced above her at the dark shadow of the edge of the road. She didn't relish the thought, but she should be able to climb back up there. She probably wouldn't have to walk any further, though. Eventually someone would come along, and she would be able to flag them down. Then what? They drive me to the hospital. An ambulance comes for Caroline, and then they take me to the police station and lock me up. It was amazing, given the desperate circumstances, how clearly the sequences of events unfolded in her mind. But a fool could have told her she was in deep trouble. She didn't know exactly what her blood alcohol level was, but there was no way it was below the legal limit. She had been driving drunk, and she had killed someone. It was as simple as that. The police were never going to believe that she had gone off the road because Caroline had socked her in the face. Sure, they would say, blame the dead cheerleader, just before they locked her in her cell. But it was your fault, Janice muttered, glancing over at Caroline, who looked in no shape to argue with her. Janice knew she should feel bad for the girl. Caroline may have been a flake, but she hadn't been an evil person. She'd had her life in front of her. Hell, she probably would have got rid of her megaphone by the time she was 21. Still, Janice couldn't make herself feel too sorry for her. Caroline was beyond pain, and Janice was feeling too sorry for herself. She was 18, 7 months from graduating from high school, and she just screwed up the rest of her life. I wish you had been driving, Janice told dead Caroline. Things would be so much simpler now. Then the idea came to her. She could move Caroline into the driver's seat. She could tell the police it had been Caroline's fault. Why not? Caroline wouldn't mind. Oh, but there might be problems. From the splattering of the blood and the wounds to Caroline's body, never mind her own wounds, the police might be able to figure out that a switch had been made. On the other hand, there was blood all over the place, hers and Caroline's. Would the police look that close? Would they have any reason to? She could call Randy as soon as possible and get him to back her up that Caroline had been driving when they left his house. She could use the excuse that she had drunk too much beer to drive. God knows the police would be able to verify that part of the story. It would work. It had to work. And it would be fair. The whole thing had been Caroline's fault to begin with. Janice climbed out of the car and groaned as her legs accepted her weight. Dark stains seeped through her once white pants. She looked up. There were no headlights on the road. There were no stars in the sky. But the cold was still there, and she shivered as she turned back to the mortal wreckage inside the front of the car. She had never handled a body before. The first thing Janice felt when she went to take hold of Caroline was a tape Bobby Walker had given her. It lay in Caroline's lap. It must have popped out of the player on impact. Not knowing where to toss it, Janice slipped it into her back pocket. She remembered how it had come on as they had gone off the road, and she shivered once more, although she did not know why. Janice shifted the gears of her car with a stick on the steering wheel. The space between the passenger seat and the driver's seat was, therefore, relatively unobstructed. Janice was surprised by how light Caroline felt as she took hold of the dead girl's shoulders. Caroline had kept herself in excellent shape. The top of Caroline's skull rolled and hit Janice on the chin as Janice pulled Caroline halfway into the driver's seat. Damn, Janice swore. Caroline's legs were stuck beneath the crushed dashboard in much the same manner Janice's own legs had been stuck. Janice had to lean all the way into the car, pressing her chest across Caroline's lap to pull Caroline's legs free. Caroline's bloody hair hung on top of her as she worked. The flesh on Caroline's left leg let go of a sickly tearing sound as Janice gave it one last hard yank. "Sorry," Janice muttered. Finally, Janice had Caroline behind the wheel. Janice was debating exactly how to position the body when she again noticed a strong gasoline smell. Naturally, she had seen dozens of movies where cars had gone off cliffs and exploded. When they had first jumped the edge of the road, she had briefly wondered if that was to be their fate, but since they hadn't blown up at impact, she had dismissed the idea. Yet this smell, this tension in the air, as if the fiery elements were alive and gathering, it was almost as if something were about to explode. Almost, and a little more. Janice, suddenly, instinctively, took a step back from the car. 2 steps, staring at dead Caroline. 3 steps. The car exploded. There was a blinding orange light, and then an incredible shove. Janice literally felt herself lifted off the ground and thrown back through the air. The orange light mushroomed before her vision as she landed hard on her butt. Scalding air singed the skin on her face, and she was forced to clench her eyes shut. Yet something forced them back open. Screams. Caroline screaming as she burned to death. To death? Janice had not felt Caroline's pulse. She had not even listened to Caroline's breathing, not closely. And of course, Caroline had been still alive. When Janice opened her eyes, she saw the most savage of human sufferings. Every part of Caroline was on fire. Her hair, her face, her chest, and her legs. Every part was trying to get out of the car, thrashing and kicking and screaming. Janice thought Caroline would never stop making that awful sound. The blood on Caroline turned black, and smoke spun through the ash of her disintegrating hair. Janice clenched her eyes shut again and prayed that Caroline would just die. Die, die, stop screaming. Caroline stopped, finally. Janice sat in the rocks and the dirt and listened to the fire as it ate up the evidence. Now there would be no way to blame her for what had happened, not that she was guilty. I should have been pulling her from the car, rather than pulling her into the driver's seat. The night was filled with painful irony. Not long after, an ambulance and the police arrived. They had seen the smoke. Janice was at the hospital. The overhead light shone bright and white. The gown they had issued her was drafty, and the examination table beneath her bottom was cold. Her doctor had the wonderful name of Please. Doctor, please, please. The doctor finished putting bandages on her knees. He was a tall, thin man with a bald head that looked like something that had been screwed on at birth. He was cheerful enough, however. The officer present was named Frank. Janice didn't know if that was his first name or his last. Officer Frank carried a notepad and a ballpoint pen. Young and serious, he was handsome enough for a daytime soap. Janice thought he believed her story, but he was going over the details for the second time. "Let's start again, just before you went off the road," Officer Frank said. "Was there anything that startled Caroline? Anything you or she did that could have distracted her?" "No," Janice said, thinking to keep it simple and stupid. "Did she doze off in any way?" "We were talking. We were both awake." "What were you talking about?" Officer Frank asked. Janice shrugged. "Boys, school, stuff." "You weren't arguing or anything?" "No." "You're sure?" "We didn't know each other that well," Janice said. "We had nothing to argue about." "Then Caroline simply drove off the road?" Officer Frank asked. "Ouch!" Janice groaned. Dr. Please was adjusting the bandage on her right knee. She had only needed 3 stitches on each leg. The scratches on her face and head had only required a good cleaning. Dr. Please did not believe she would have any lasting scars. "Sorry?" Dr. Please said. "The road turns there," Janice told the policeman. "She didn't exactly drive off the road. She just didn't turn to stay on the road." "Do you know how much Caroline had drunk at the party?" Officer Frank asked. "No," Janice said. "Then why did you feel confident letting her drive instead of you?" Janice kept her expression neutral. She had already called Randy and told him to back up her story that Caroline had been driving, should the need arise. He had immediately known what the deal was, and was not happy about it, but he was willing to support her. Anyway, he didn't know for a fact that Caroline had not been driving. "I knew how many beers I had drunk," Janice said. 8 or 9. Caroline wanted to drive. I let her. I thought my head would clear by the time we reached her house. "I'm sorry," Officer Frank said sympathetically. "I know you've explained all this before. It's my job to get everything straight." "I don't mind," Janice said. "Caroline drove off the side. We crashed at the bottom, and I was thrown clear, and a moment later the car exploded." She paused to wipe away a tear. She wasn't sure if it was for herself or Caroline. "That's all I can tell you," she said. Officer Frank lowered his head and spoke softly. "Was she unconscious when the car caught fire?" Janice nodded sadly. "I'm sure she didn't feel a thing." Officer Frank nodded in understanding and closed his notepad. Dr. Pleats finished with her bandages and stood back up. Together, the two men helped her off the examination table. Janice winced once more in pain. Guilt weighed heavily on her heart, but she felt relieved as well. She was getting away with it. "You've had a hard night, but you're one lucky girl," Dr. Pleats said. "Yeah," Officer Frank said. "If you hadn't been thrown from the car, there would have been no one there to save you." Janice felt a shiver go up her spine at the officer's remark. She thought of the old refrain that someone had just walked across her grave, but it was Caroline's grave they would be digging, not hers. She had made certain of that. "I feel lucky," she agreed, but the words sounded hollow in her ears. She ended up having to change back into her blood-stained pants. It was either that or go home in a hospital gown. Her parents were out of town for the weekend. Officer Frank took her back to her place in his squad car. They spoke little along the way. Janice did not know the time. Her watch had not cracked in the accident, but it was not working nevertheless. Inside the empty house, she was quick to get out of her disgusting clothes. The tape Bobby Walker had given Caroline fell on the floor as she pulled off her pants, and she set it aside. She made her way into the shower and turned on the water hot and hard. There was still blood in her hair. She didn't care if she soaked the bandages on her knees. They could always be replaced. Back in the kitchen, while drying off with a towel, she noticed the answering machine light blinking on and off. There was a message. It was odd. She had not noticed the light when she had come in, and she had undressed right beside the machine. She pushed the play button and turned toward the refrigerator. She was dying for something to drink. Caroline's voice spoke at her back. Janice stopped dead in her tracks. "Hi, Janice, this is Caroline Spencer. I was wondering if you could give me a ride to the party tonight. Please give me a call when you get in. I'd really appreciate it." "Mother Mary," Janice whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. Of course, there was a simple explanation. Caroline had called her earlier before the party. The cheerleader said as much on the message. Janice quickly crossed to the answering machine and replayed the tape. Her heart kept right on pounding. Her parents' machine always noted the time a call came in, but there was no time attached to Caroline's message. Caroline could have called at any time. So what? She must have called after I left for the party, but before she arrived at Randy's house. It doesn't matter that she was already there when I got there. I didn't go straight to Randy's. I stopped at the store and bought chips for the party. That still didn't explain why there was a message at all from Caroline. The cheerleader had not called her once during the 4 years they had gone to school together. Then again, Caroline had wanted to drive home with her. Maybe Caroline had wanted to talk about their rivalry over Bobby Walker even before the party. Janice replayed the message one more time. There was no mistaking the voice. It was Caroline's. Janice turned off the ringer on the phone. She was tired of having to think. She lowered the volume on the answering machine. She didn't want anyone else's calls to disturb her that night. She made her way back into the bathroom. She would finish drying her hair and brush her teeth and hit the sack. Tomorrow, she would take care of tomorrow. 10 minutes later, she was lying in bed when she heard the answering machine clicking in the other room. Someone was calling. It didn't matter, she told herself. It was probably just Randy. The machine clicked a minute more as the tape slowly wound and rewound. Then there was silence in the darkness, except for her beating heart. Try as she might, she could not make herself relax. A minute later, she was in the kitchen checking to see who had called. It was not possible. "Janice, this is Caroline again. I really need a ride to the party. Can't you give me one? You're my only hope. If you don't come get me, I won't get to go. Please, Janice, call me right back. I know you're there." When the message was done, Janice stood and stared at the machine as if it were a coiled snake ready to bite. She was running out of explanations, and her nerves were running out of resiliency. Her hand shook as she reached over and turned off the machine. Someone had been playing a trick on her. The message had not been on the tape when she had arrived home, of that she was certain. Someone, one of the girls on the cheerleader squad perhaps, must be able to fake Caroline's voice. The person must have heard what happened and be calling out of spite. I shall listen to the message again. I know Caroline's voice. I'll be able to tell it's fake. But Janice did not turn the machine back on. She had listened to the first message 3 times, and it had sounded exactly like Caroline. She worried the second one would sound no different, but that wasn't her real worry. Caroline's calling me. Caroline's dead. Jesus Christ. Janice left the light on in the kitchen and went back into her bedroom and crawled under the covers. She hugged the blankets tight around her head so that the boogeyman in the dark corner couldn't see her, hear her, or even smell her. But the boogeyman was in the kitchen, not the corner, and she was in bed less than 15 minutes when she heard the machine clicking again. She sat up with a bolt. "No, you don't," she screamed. "I turned you off. You cannot take any messages." The machine kept on clicking, the tape spinning. Janice got out of bed and ran into the kitchen. She switched on the phone and picked up the receiver. She got a dial tone. She studied the answering machine. The message light was blinking. It had turned itself back on. Somehow. A power surge? Some strange way. Janice reached to press the play button. Then she stopped. "I don't want to hear what was said. It will only scare me. I'm scared enough. I should go to the garage and get a hammer and break the machine into 1,000 pieces." Janice pressed the play button. She had to know what she already knew. This time, Caroline sounded angry. "Janice, you know who this is? Pick up the goddamn phone. We're going to the party and you're taking me. There's no way I can drive myself. I have a fever. I'm burning up. If you don't come with me, I'll drive off the road. You got that, girl? Come get me now." The message ended with a loud click. Caroline had slammed down the phone. But it had been her, Ms. Megaphone. Absolutely. She's alive. She survived the fire. It was the only logical explanation besides insanity. Janice would rather believe the doctor and police had lied to her than admit her own mind had gone over the cliff with her Mustang. It happened all the time in the papers that people got burned over 90% of their body and survived. The people at the hospital must have been trying to trick her into incriminating herself. But if Caroline is alive, she should be too injured to call. There was only one way to settle the issue. She would have to return to the hospital. She would have to see with her own eyes the burnt patient or the burnt corpse. Janice put her blood-stained pants back on, her shirt, and her jacket. She reasoned that she wanted to wear the same clothes because they were sitting within arm's reach on the floor. But the bloody legs had already begun to dry, and the pants cracked and poked at her skin as she moved. She even put her broken watch back on, for all the good it would do her. She pulled the tape from the answering machine before she left. She didn't want to come home to any new messages. Her parents had left town in her dad's car. Janice drove her mom's car to the hospital. It was brand new and the radio and cassette player were of high quality, but she left them both off. The hospital parking lot was almost deserted. Janice entered through the emergency doors. At first, Janice thought the whole place was empty. There was no one sitting in the waiting rooms, and the nurse's station had been left neglected. The silence of the place was uncanny, as if all patients and personnel alike had died since she left. Janice moved down a long, bright hall soundlessly. She was turning a corner when a hand reached out and touched her shoulder. Janice practically jumped out of her socks. "Can I help you?" asked an old nurse. She was dressed in wrinkles and white. Her big nose hung over her pruned mouth like a witch's beak. "Where is everybody?" Janice asked nervously. "They're here, those that are supposed to be." The nurse gestured to Janice's messy pants. "What happened to you, dear?" "I was here earlier. I was in a car accident with another girl. I came back to see how she was doing." The woman didn't hesitate or show an ounce of sympathy. "She's dead." Janice forced a smile. "I don't think so. Caroline's been calling me since I got home." The old woman cocked her head to the side thoughtfully. "Was Caroline her name? I don't think that was her name." "Oh, yes, she was a friend of mine," Janice added. "She drove off the road?" The nurse nodded. "I know the driver of the car was killed." She glanced down at her watch. "I have to see about a patient. You go home, you hear? There's no one here for you to see." At that, the old woman walked away, and Janice was left alone in the empty hall with her fear. Was she surprised? She had been the one to see Caroline burned to death. Yet, who had called? A question without an answer. Perhaps it was the mystery alone that led Janice's feet to the elevator, that made her hand push the button to the basement. The basement, where the morgue in a hospital was usually located. Perhaps it was another kind of feeling that made Janice want to see Caroline. Janice found the morgue without difficulty. It lay behind heavy twin green doors. Inside was cold and damp and filled with bad smells and gleaming stainless steel tables, where Janice knew they cut open bodies and took things out. There was no butcher on duty. Janice's stomach rolled with unpleasant emotions and sensations. On a table on the left lay a 6-foot-long green body bag. It was occupied. Janice stepped slowly to the table. She raised a hand to touch it, and then pulled back the hand. What was she doing? Was she going to open the bag and try to piece together what was left of Caroline's face? What if it wasn't even Caroline, but an old drunk who had rolled out of a slimy alley? The ordeal of unzipping the bag might prove nothing. except how much she had left in her stomach to vomit. It was then Janice spotted the tag at the top of the bag. It was tied to the easy body bag carry handle by an elastic string. Janice sighed with relief. She would just have to read the name on the tag. She reached over and held it up in the fake phosphorescent light. Janice Adams. Sure, Janice said, and she laughed softly. They had got their names confused upon admission. Janice could imagine the nurses and doctors hurriedly calling back and forth when the wreckage from the accident had been brought in. Was that the girl with the scraped knees or the one without any skin left? It was a simple mistake to make, Janice supposed. Caroline was dead and bagged. There had to be someone at school who had heard about the accident, and who could mimic Caroline's voice perfectly. The mystery was settled. But maybe I should unzip the bag and take a look. Just a little. Why? Janice asked her in mind. No answer came to her, only a deep, cold feeling, as cold as the stainless steel where the body bag lay. She backed a step away from the body bag, just as she had backed away from the car before it had exploded in her face. Something was ready to blow up again in front of her. She could feel it, but she didn't know what it was. She didn't want to know. All of a sudden, she just wanted to get out of the hospital as quickly as possible. Janice ran from the morgue. She ran all the way to the car, without seeing the old nurse on the way out. Her mother's car started without a hitch, and soon she was flying down the road. Yet she did not know where she was heading. Suddenly, the area looked alien, as if she had taken a wrong turn into the Twilight Zone when she had read the name, her name, on the body bag. She turned to the left, the right, searching for a familiar landmark. She didn't recognize anything. I'm upset. That's all it is. I'll put music on. I'll calm down. I'll find my way home. Janice stuck out her right hand and searched for a tape on the passenger seat. Her mother usually kept a few lying around. Her fingers chanced upon one, and she slipped it into the cassette player. It was the tape Bobby Walker had given Caroline. How odd. Janice could remember putting it into her back pocket when she had moved Caroline into the driver's seat, but she could not imagine how it had got into her mother's car. The only tape she had brought with her from home had been the one in the answering machine. The Black Walker was in a dark mood. I come from the past. I eat the light. I knew you when you were young. I tell you my story, but I sleep with a gun. This is my night. This is your night. I'm a Black Walker now, babe. Touch me softly, and you get a fright. Yet all of a sudden, Janice remembered how, when she had returned home from the hospital the first time, she had laid Bobby's tape on top of the answering machine. She had just set it there, after glancing at the machine to make sure no one had called. And no one had called until a few minutes later. The stars are holes in the sky. The moon is a thorn in the dark. It trips white light. Give me the knife. Let's cut out our eyes. But was that all there was to it? She had been anxious to get out of her blood-stained clothes. She had pulled them off right there in the kitchen, standing next to the answering machine. Then what had she done? She had gone into the shower and washed off the blood. Then the calls from Caroline had started. Wait a second. When I noticed the first call, Bobby's tape was no longer on top of the machine. I would have seen it. Yeah, this is our night. This is what's right. I'm a Black Walker, babe. Brush my lips, and I bleed you white. Oh, God, Janice whispered. She repeated the point to herself. The only tape she had taken from home, when coming to the hospital the second time, had been the tape from the machine, the tape with Caroline's messages, the tape she must have put in the answering machine, the tape Bobby had given Caroline. But why did I put it in? What did I expect to hear? Messages, maybe. The tape was just full of messages. The song ended and no new song began. Oh, but Caroline. She was still there. The car cassette player began to talk to Janice. Hi, Janice. This is Caroline. I'm glad you got my messages and can give me a ride. I know it's been a while since you've been to my house, so why don't I give you directions? First, get on Winston and take it out of town. Janice passed a street sign. She was on Winston. The houses were thinning. She was heading out of town. She could hear the tape playing, the faint hiss of emptiness. Caroline had paused, for the moment. Then there was more. When you come to Rayen, Janice, make a right. You'll take Rayen all the way out to Taylor, but you've got to watch those roads. They're dangerous at night. Janice spotted Rayen. She made a right. She didn't know why. She didn't want to. It was just that none of the streets looked quite right, and she was lost, and she wanted to get home. But this is insane. Caroline is not taking me home. She's taking me to her home. And where did Caroline live now? In a body bag? Janice didn't want to go there. Janice had to concentrate on the road. It had narrowed and was going up and down, a dangerous ride indeed. An eerie 10 minutes went by, then she was out in the country in the middle of nowhere. It was dark, but soon, she reasoned, the sun should be coming up. She glanced at her broken watch. It had begun to tick again. 10 to 1. 10 minutes before the car exploded. What a coincidence. Caroline spoke to her one last time. "If you get lost, Janice, you can always stop and look around. My place is not that hard to find. Thanks again for remembering to come get me. You don't know how much it means to me." The road abruptly rose again and turned sharply to the right. Janice pulled onto the shoulder of the road. She parked and got out. For the first time in a long time she recognized exactly where she was. The night was black as spilt ink, but it was as if every little rock and bush in the surroundings were illuminated by a hidden moon. She was where they had gone off the road. Janice crept to the edge of the cliff and peered down. Where is the wreckage? They couldn't have gotten rid of it so quickly. Not only was there no burnt car at the bottom of the ravine, there was no sign that an accident had even occurred on the spot. Puzzled, Janice carefully began to climb down the slope. The way was steep, but numerous jagged stones gave her ample footholds. Her puzzlement grew the deeper she went. She was sure she had the right spot, and she clearly remembered the debris the explosion had spewed over the area. The burst tires, the shattered glass, the fried metal. The garbage should have still been there. The police wouldn't have gone over the spot with a vacuum cleaner, for God's sake. On the other hand, and this is what scared Janice the most, she felt no confusion at all. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be. What did she expect? She had followed a goddamn ghost's directions to the place. Janice paused to check her watch again. Still ticking toward 1. It was only right then, in that moment, and for no other reason, that Janice believed that Caroline was not dead. The name on the tag on the body bag came back to haunt her. How sad, she thought, that her own name could fill her with such dread. A flicker of headlights shone above her, the sound of an engine. Janice turned toward the cliff and looked up. A car came out of the light. Off the side of the road, it sailed into the air above her head, and the screams of its occupants filled the air. 2 terrified girls plunging into God only knew what destiny. Janice watched them fall with an odd mixture of calm and agony. She could hear a tape in the car playing above the screams. Bobby's present. The car flew directly over Janice's head. Bobby must have known a thing or two when he had given the tape to Caroline. This was their night. This was what was right. The car crashed. It did not explode. Yet Janice knew it was only a matter of time, of seconds. She hurried down the remainder of the steep embankment. There were 2 girls trapped, and she had to save them. Janice went to the passenger side first. The girl was bloody and unconscious, but Janice could tell in an instant that she was alive. She was, after all, breathing. The faint rasp of her laboring lungs reached Janice's ears as if through a psychic back door where important details could be known with a certainty beyond reason. Janice pulled open the wrecked door and took hold of the girl's limp form. There was a sudden rush of joy into the moment, into Janice's heart. It was the first joy she had known all night. Caroline. It's Caroline. I can save her. Janice lifted Caroline into her arms with an ease that made no sense, and carried her away from the car. She set her down gently against a boulder, then turned for the other girl, the driver, who also appeared to be unconscious. But the girl inside woke up just as Janice reached the car. The girl stretched to open the door, just as Janice tried to do likewise. All Janice wanted to do was let the girl out. Her efforts proved counterproductive. The door handle wasn't damaged. It was one of those things. The 2 of them kept getting in each other's way. Janice would let go of the door handle to give the girl a chance to do it alone, and then the girl would do the same. Then Janice would try the handle again just as the girl tried it again. The end result was that the girl inside the car could not get out of the car, and Janice knew that was not a good thing. She could smell the gasoline in the air, and naturally, at the same moment, the girl inside the car also noticed the smell. I don't think that was her name. Janice didn't think so either. Slowly, but with the practice of an act that had been done perfectly before, Janice began to back away from the car. The girl inside had frozen, then her head turned. No, it whirled in the direction of Janice. She saw her, they saw each other. Something passed between them, an understanding, but it did not have to pass any further than the light between an object and a mirror. Janice saw the point of the whole night in that instant, even if the girl inside the car couldn't, as of yet, see through her eyes. It was simply to get Caroline out of the car first. But that was not exactly true. No one would save Caroline, Janice thought, not according to the accounts that would be written. She would appear to have been thrown to safety, an unconscious recipient of good luck. As for the other girl, the driver, Well, she should have known better than to drink and drive. The car exploded. It didn't send Janice flying far away, though. It seemed to suck her inside, where it was warm, hot as a hell she no longer deserved. Janice burned. Once more her wish had come true. All the evidence was destroyed. Caroline awoke to the sound of someone calling her name. Caroline? Wake up, Caroline. You're all right. I must not be all right if he has to tell me I am. Caroline opened her eyes. A tall, bony, middle-aged doctor towered above her. She was in a hospital bed. White bandages covered her arms, and from the feel of it, her head as well. She tried to sit up, and a sharp pain went from one ear to the other, right through the center of her skull. She quickly lay back down. It would be better if you tried not to move, the doctor said. What happened? Caroline whispered. You were in a car accident. Your friend was taking you home from a party, and she drove off the road. Janice? How is Janice? When the car crashed, you were thrown free, but Janice wasn't so fortunate. The doctor lowered his head. The car exploded, and she was killed. Oh, God! Caroline's eyes filled with tears. Did she burn to death? The police believe she was knocked out by the impact. I'm sure she didn't feel a thing. That's good, Caroline whispered, although she didn't know if that was true. The doctor reached down and squeezed her arm. This must be very hard for you, he said. We weren't that close, but yes, it's hard. Caroline sighed, then added, not sure even where her words are coming from. She was a good girl. She was the kind who would do something for you if you really needed it. Do you know what I mean? I do indeed. The doctor glanced at his watch. It's 2 p.m. You've been asleep all day. Your parents have been here since late last night, but they just stepped out for a bite of lunch. I could see you were coming around, and told them you were going to be fine. But there is a young man here who's anxious to see you. He's been here all night as well. Caroline was dumbfounded. She knew tons of boys at school, but she could not imagine that any one of them cared enough about her to stay up all night. What's his name? She asked. Bobby Walker. He can come in and see you for 10 minutes, if you'd like, but that will have to be it. You need rest now more than anything. You have a bad concussion and several broken ribs. Bobby? Caroline whispered, amazed. Hadn't she and Janice been arguing about Bobby just before they crashed? Vaguely, Caroline could recall them fighting about something. I would like to see him? Fine, the doctor said, moving for the door. Caroline had a room all to herself. It may be a few minutes before I see him. I have to check on a patient next door. By the way, my name is Dr. Please if you ever want to have me paged. Caroline smiled faintly, dabbing at her tears. Dr. Please? The doctor grinned. I hear it all the time. He opened the door. I'll see you soon, Caroline. Thanks, Caroline said. Dr. Please left, and she was alone with her aches and pains and her sorrow over Janice. She wished to God she hadn't insisted Janice give her a ride home. The poor girl had drunk too much beer to see straight, never mind to drive. A fool could have seen that. Caroline spotted the phone on the stand beside her bed. She wondered if many people knew about her accident. She doubted if any of them would have called to see how she was doing, but, just in case, she decided to pick up the messages on her answering machine. She still couldn't believe Bobby Walker had stayed up all night for her. He must really like her. Not many people did, she realized sadly. She was the most unpopular popular person in school. She had 2 messages. The first one was from Bobby Walker. Hi, Carol, this is Bobby. Wanted to know if you loved the tape, if it did something for you. I'll see you soon, if you're still alive, that is. Caroline was confused. When had he left the message? Immediately after the party? Before he knew about the accident? That must have been the case. It would have been in extremely bad taste to say what he had when she was lying unconscious in the hospital. Yet it wasn't exactly a sweet message, even if he hadn't known about the accident. His voice had sounded cold, like the voice of the singer on the tape he had given her. In fact, it hit her right then. He sounded exactly like the singer. Bobby Walker and the Black Walker. Interesting. There is a long pause on the answering machine tape. The second message was from Janice. Hi, Caroline, this is Janice. You called me, so I'm calling you. But don't try calling me back. I can't answer the phone. The fire burned off my hands, but don't worry, I'll be in touch. Soon. Caroline dropped the phone and screamed. She was still screaming when Bobby Walker entered the hospital room. He was smiling. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of Collect Call Part 1 by Christopher Pike. Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and thank you very much for joining me for my production of Collect Call Part 1 by Christopher Pike. Christopher Pike likes to dabble with more esoteric and harder to access themes with young adult horror. He's not afraid to broach far out topics like religion, as he did in the last Vampire series, or like isolation, like he did in Whisper of Death, or like a school shooting, like he did in Monster, or about witches, like he did in, well, Witch. I graduated to Christopher Pike after R.L. Stine. I saw someone reading The Last Vampire Omnibus on the way to school one day on the bus. I stopped and asked her what it was about, and she said it was amazing, and I ended up buying the first book, and I agree. The Last Vampire series is the gold standard for vampire fiction, period. Hands down, everything else comes to a full stop. So when you read The Last Vampire and then you see something like Twilight come out, they clash completely because they're two different styles of monsters. Watching Christopher Pike operate in a short story format is really refreshing, and seeing him do a take on social commentary like drunk driving, and then having it go awry, just completely go wrong, it turns into a nightmare. Janice had no right drinking as much as she did, she had no right driving like she did, and she also had no right instigating Caroline the way that she did and calling her a slut. No wonder Caroline reached over and belted her across the face. I would have. And then it causes a car crash. Holy cow, I can't believe that Janice didn't see if Caroline was alive. I don't know if I buy the idea that Caroline was really alive when Janice was moving her body after the car crashed from the passenger seat into the driver's seat. Janice was all over her body moving her. She would have been up close and personal. She would have noticed a heartbeat. She would have noticed breath. She would have noticed something that would have said, "Oh my God, she's still alive. I have to get help." We know that Janice wasn't a big fan of Caroline, but I don't think that she wanted her dead, not by any stretch of the word. And then when the car blows up and Caroline burns to death, oh my, that is the worst outcome that could have happened. And then somehow Janice ends up back in time at the exact same scenario because now she's getting all these calls from Caroline, and she gets in her car and she drives out to the cliff where it all happened, and she does rescue Caroline, but she can't get herself out of the car. And next thing we know, Caroline wakes up in a hospital with Dr. Please, and now Janice is the one that is dead. So what's really going on here? I am very eager to read Collect Call Part 2. There is a lot to this story. If you get nothing else from this little collection of 13 Tales of Horror by 13 Masters of Horror that I am reading, you should understand that Christopher Pike is extremely skilled at weaving a tale of horror, and it can quickly become a tale of terror. There is a fine line between horror and terror. Horror is a jump scare. Horror is the thing underneath your bed. Terror is when you are able to take that situation and put the reader or the viewer into that situation and make them really feel for the character. Terror is being abandoned 2,000 feet in the air on an abandoned radio tower, and you can't get down because the ladder that you used to get up there in the first place collapsed underneath your weight when you tried to get down. And now there's birds circling you, waiting for you to die. That is terror. Terror is you are a 5,000-year-old vampire, and even you have your limits. Terror is Christopher Pike. Horror is just about everybody else. But terror? That's Pike's bag. And I really hope that you enjoy this story. If you liked this story and the way it was structured, you should definitely check out Christopher Pike. I highly recommend The Last Vampire series. Books 1 through 6 are phenomenal. Books 7 and 8 are not so good, and I have not read 9 yet. He also wrote Whisper of Death, which is fantastic, and Monster, which is also fantastic, and Witch, which is very good. Those are all 3 very supernatural stories, but they all take their time telling their tale in their own way. Please enjoy more Christopher Pike. So what should I read next? I don't know. Send me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am also at home right here on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that join button to show your support. Any help is greatly appreciated. I really, truly do mean that. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me tell them tales of horror, and sometimes terror. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.